Courtenay-Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to rise today to speak to Bill C-13, legislation that would implement the protocol on the accession of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to the Comprehensive and Progressive Trade Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, at its core, Mr. Speaker, this bill updates Canadian legislation so that the United Kingdom can formally join the CPT PP trade agreement, and so that Canada can meet its obligations under that accession protocol. But let me begin by acknowledging the broader context in which this legislation is being debated. Canada's economy is deeply tied to international trade, as you're well aware. Millions of jobs in this country depend on exports and our ability to access global markets. And over the past several years, we've been reminded, Mr. Speaker, also about how fragile the global supply chains can be and how risky it can be for Canada to rely too heavily on a single trading partner. We acknowledge that as New Democrats, Mr. Speaker, that diversifying our trade relationships matters, that strengthening economic cooperation with democratic allies matters, and building resilient rules-based trading systems is in Canada's long-term interest. Now, the United Kingdom, obviously, Mr. Speaker, is an important partner in that effort. It's a G7 country, one of the world's largest economies, and a nation with which Canada shares deep historical ties, cultural connections, and long-standing diplomatic relationships. Expanding trade opportunities between Canada and the United Kingdom has the potential to support Canadian exporters, encourage investment, and reinforce the global rules-based trading system at a time when that system is facing increasing pressure. And it's for those reasons that there's value in strengthening our economic partnership with the United Kingdom. However, supporting trade diversification doesn't mean giving the government a blank check. Parliament has a responsibility to ensure that trade agreements serve Canadians fairly, protect our public interest, and deliver real benefits for workers, farmers, and communities across this country. And on that front, Mr. Speaker, Bill C-13 raises several important concerns that must be addressed. The first concern is transparency. Under the Government of Canada's policy on tabling of treaties in Parliament, when the government introduces implementing legislation for a new free trade agreement, it's required to table an economic impact assessment outlining the projected costs and benefits of the agreement. Now, this policy exists for a simple reason, Mr. Speaker, that members of Parliament can't make informed decisions about trade agreements without understanding their economic implications. This requirement was introduced after repeated calls for greater transparency in trade negotiations. And in fact, in 2020, the government committed to strengthening parliamentary oversight of trade agreements by ensuring that economic impact assessments would accompany implementing legislation. Yet in the case of Bill C-13, no economic impact assessment has been tabled. That undermines accountability, and it weakens the ability of this House to properly scrutinize the agreement before us. The second concern, Mr. Speaker, that we have is it relates to the ongoing barriers faced by Canadian agricultural producers in accessing the United Kingdom market. For years, and we've heard this in the House today repeatedly, that Canadian beef and pork producers who've raised concerns about the United Kingdom's sanitary and phytosanitary regulations. These rules relate to food safety and animal and plant health, but in practice, they've functioned as a non-tariff barrier that prevents Canadian products from entering the UK market. Despite years of discussions, consultations, and negotiations, these barriers remain largely unchanged. This needs to be fixed, Mr. Speaker, and the result is a trading relationship that is far from reciprocal. In fact, the numbers tell a very clear story, that there were no Canadian beef exports to the United Kingdom in 2024, none in 2025, and at the same time, imports of UK beef into Canada have increased significantly. They rose from $16.6 million in 2023 to $42.5 million in 2024, representing an increase of more than 150% in a single year. This is not the outcome Canadian producers were promised when these negotiations began. Organizations representing Canada's agricultural sector, including the Canadian Cattle Association, the Canadian Pork Council, and the Canadian Meat Council have all raised serious concerns about the lack of meaningful market access. So they need to be negotiated, they need to be consulted, Mr. Speaker. Canadian farmers and ranchers operate under some of the highest food safety standards in the world. They produce high-quality products that are competitive in markets around the globe, and they deserve fair and reciprocal access to markets, especially when Canada is opening its own market to imports. Without meaningful access to the UK market, the benefits of this agreement will remain limited for many Canadian producers. The third concern relates to investor-state dispute settlement provisions, commonly known as the ISDS, and these provisions allow foreign investors to challenge government policies through international arbitration if they believe those policies harm their investments. Under NAFTA, Canada faced numerous ISDS claims from foreign investors. More than 60% of the cases filed against Canada under NAFTA were linked to environmental or natural resource measures. That's deeply concerning, and these experiences raise serious questions about the impact of ISDS provisions on the government's ability to regulate in the public interest. That is one of the reasons why Canada removed the ISDS from the renegotiated Canada-United States-Mexico agreement, the CUSMA agreement. And in the case of Bill C-13, the government has not secured a side letter with the United Kingdom to exclude ISDS provisions between our two countries. This is particularly puzzling because the United Kingdom has already signed such side letters with Australia and New Zealand in their agreements. So Canada could have negotiated the same arrangement, and we hope that they will. Instead, these provisions remain in place. A coalition of civil society organizations, labour unions, and academics from both Canada and the United Kingdom, they called on the government to remove ISDS protections from this agreement. We're hoping that the government will act. If Canada has already recognized these risks in other agreements, then it's reasonable to expect the government to address them here as well. Mr. Speaker, you've heard about this a lot today, that there's another issue connected to Canada's relationship with the United Kingdom that deserves attention in this debate. And it's a decades-long issue of fairness that affects tens of thousands of seniors living here in Canada. And I'm referring to the problem of frozen British pensions. At the outset, I want to thank first Ian Alexander from Nanaimo. He's the chair of the Canadian Alliance of British Pensioners, for his leadership on this issue, and all of those that are members of that organization. More than 100,000 British pensioners live here in Canada that actually receive that state pension from the United Kingdom. Those pensions are frozen at the rate that they first received when they retired or when they moved abroad. So for over 70 years, unlike British pensioners living in the United States, Israel, Turkey, the Philippines, the European Union, or several other countries, British pensioners here in Canada, they don't receive annual cost of living increases. This is unfair. Canada itself does not treat pensioners in this way when they move overseas. Whether a Canadian retiree lives in Vancouver or London or in Sydney, Australia, their CPP benefits continue to increase with inflation. The UK's policy stands in stark contrast. The consequences are very real for many seniors. As inflation rises and living costs increase, the purchasing power of frozen pensioners declines year after year. Some seniors are struggling to afford basic necessities such as food, heating, and medication. I think about Anne Puckridge, a 100-year-old veteran who is leaving. She's literally receiving, Mr. Speaker, less than half of her pension because she chose to retire in Canada. And while pensioners in the UK receive £176 a week, the freeze means she's only getting £72 a week. Like Anne, many were unaware of this policy before they moved to Canada. And we know, Mr. Speaker, a third of women that are over 65 in this country are living in poverty. People like Anne, who spent decades contributing to the UK pension system, believing their retirement income would follow them wherever they chose to live, which it should have. Instead, they've discovered too late that their pensions would never increase. Because these pensions remain frozen, many seniors eventually rely on Canadian income support programs, including the Guaranteed Income Supplement. In effect, Canadian taxpayers end up helping to fill the gap created by the UK government's policy, and estimates suggest this situation costs Canada hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And successive Canadian governments have raised this issue with the United Kingdom repeatedly. Each time the UK has declined. That raises an important question. If Canada is strengthening trade relations with the United Kingdom and deepening our economic partnership through agreements like this one, Why is this longstanding injustice not being addressed as part of those negotiations? Trade negotiations are moments of leverage. They provide opportunities to resolve longstanding disputes and secure fair outcomes, exactly like this one, Mr. Speaker. Yet once again, this government appears to have failed to use that leverage. So, Mr. Speaker, C-13 represents an important step in Canada's trade relationship with the United Kingdom. Trade diversification matters, building stronger partnerships with trusted allies matters, and strengthening the global trading system matters, but Parliament must ensure that these agreements are fair, transparent, and in the public interest. That means providing the economic analysis needed for informed decision-making. It means ensuring that Canadian producers receive meaningful access to international markets. It means protecting democratic policy making by addressing problematic investor-state dispute resolution settlement provisions, and it means standing up for fairness for the tens of thousands of seniors in Canada affected by the UK's frozen pension policy. Trade agreements should reflect more than economic opportunity. They should reflect fairness, reciprocity, and respect for the people whose lives are shaped by these policies. Thank you.